Hey, it's Chris. What are we talking about today? On the Underground. Sent to me. This is Paris, New York. One of the most highly underrated games in my collection. This is a new edition, new maps, slight twist. What do you need to know? And do you really need this one if you got the first one? Or is this one really worth picking up? Let's go. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about this map in front of me. This map actually looks like a whole heck of a lot going on. And what that is essentially is an end game situation. It got a little jostled and moved around as I moved it in here to set it up in front of you. But essentially what you've got going on is one of my favorite ways of playing a game, right? Thin rule book with a very high degree of manipulation of those simple rules. Like your El Grandes, like your Hansas. On the Underground takes your Ticket to Ride, amplifies it up, and makes it just a heck of a lot more enjoyable and very tactical at the same time. And so all you're doing in this game is, well, taking 4 actions on your turn. And those actions are really, really simple, right? Most of it is going to involve laying these little colored tracks in the first place, because all you're doing is laying them on lines, connecting them. And there's a few rules that govern that. There's a few rules that make sure you're only doing it in a certain way, thematically speaking, of course. But there's a few twists on that as well, and a difference between the New York and the Paris side of things, as you'll see. The New York is the map I have up, and it's the one that's recommended if you're first time playing this game. This game essentially is just route building, and then based on your routes, the passenger is going to be moving through one of 4 situational locations that are up on a turn-by-turn basis. You score points based on whose line the passenger uses. So you want to make sure that you have a line available to the passenger that they can utilize to the, well, least frustration, the least amount of stops, the least amount of walking, the least amount of all of those things in order to get to one of these in the first place. Got to be careful with the fingers there. Don't want to give anything else to the camera. So what you're going to be doing is, well, just starting him off in the center of the board. And at the beginning of the game, you draw up 4 of these locations that you see scattered all over the map. And 4 of these are going to be available, and you'll randomly allocate them to places on the map, and it shows you exactly where you're going to be putting them. And then what you're trying to do essentially is manage your railway so that the least amount of lines, the least amount of color changing. No one wants to change subway lines or, rail tracks. No one ever wants to go off of a different one. You want to be lazy as possible, and this is no different. So if I can take one line, doesn't matter how long the line is, from one place to the next, closest as well, that's what matters. And closest doesn't matter, though, at the same time. Closest in the sense that, again, not physical distance, but line changes. So right now, if he's in the center here at Grand Central Station, and I want to get to Woodside here, well, I can take the orange line and get directly there. If I had to take anything else, it would have to be, well, blue line to orange line. I could take blue here to here, but then blue stops here, and then it would have to be here. Now, if I had additional blue line maybe here instead, then it could be blue or orange. And if it's the same, the player whose turn it is decides. So if blue and orange are, well, the same player, well, that wouldn't make any sense because no one would do it that way. But if they were obviously different players, then whoever's rail that was, you'd take your own rail. And that game just rinses and repeats until you run out of rails and places. You go until this deck has gone all the way through. And there's a couple locations on here twice, but most of them for the majority are only on there once. So once you play that, you pick this up, then you grab a new one of these and replace it, and now maybe it's down here, and you can kind of see the dynamic of, okay, well, how then do I get to the next closest location? Well, this one actually, again, would be blue, because blue can get me all the way over here with only taking one line. And that is how you do it. And then this one gets replaced. We draw another card here, up, back into the middle, and so maybe now it's here. So now you're trying to figure out how many line changes would I have to do to get to one of these other locations. That's it. That's the whole game in a nutshell. A few other caveats and twists to it that give it a little bit of a, well, more tactical and slightly more strategic nature. As you can see, some of these spots on the board are a little bit different. You have 3 different main types of spots on the board that are not just your gray generic circles. You've got your targets. These are your end lines, essentially, meaning there is no getting out of there. Once you place one into there, well, it can't go anywhere else. And if you connect to one of those, well, you can't really get your line any further in that direction, which again, we'll talk about how you mitigate in a minute, but it gets you 3 points. So 3 points right there. And I didn't mention earlier, but 1 point every time your line is used. Doesn't matter which line it is. If you change lines and you get 2 lines used of your same color in one turn, that's 2 points. Then you have the blues, the arrows there. And those, anytime you connect a line to those, you get a point. Then you also have, as you can see down here, Grand Central Station is surrounded by this purple blob in this area. Anytime you connect one purple blob in a line to another purple blob, however many purple blobs were previously connected is how many points you get. So when I connect a line to this one, doesn't get many points. Now, if I connect the same line right here to this purple blob over here, then I get a point. Now, if I connect it to the other purple blob up over here, and they're all touching together, then that gets me 2 more points. Rinse and repeat. The last element of things, the other thing you can do with your 4 actions on a turn-by-turn basis is, well, Chris, you didn't actually tell us how to build lines. You build lines by, well, just building off of the end of things. So, you know what? Let's scrap this all. Make it really easy, right? Red, that's my line, right? I cannot build, for example, right here, because I only have the ends of the line that I can go. I could go here. 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 I could not go here or here. Well, you can spend 2 of your actions to get branch points. Branch points are other little tokens here in this bag that you can see that are the little half circles. You get 2 of those. Then on your turn, you can say, I'm going to play here. Spend them accordingly. There you go. That's how you're going to be going in different directions. You just need to do that sometimes, though, because you need to make sure that wherever this passenger is, that they have access to your line, because they will be counting the least amount of spaces, the least amount of times they have to physically walk to get on the line is going to matter the most. If they can do that 0, they will always do it 0, no matter how long the line or the actual color track is. That is the above all else minimum. And then the number of lines that it has to actually go on physically. And you're just trying to figure that out on a turn-by-turn basis after you've taken your 4 actions. And you do that, you do that, you do that, you do that until the game ends. Now, the Paris side of things, if we flip this whole board over and had all the pieces go spilling everywhere, it's going to give you a slightly different, well, completely different asymmetric setup of all of these other things that we've mentioned. The other aspect of things that the Paris side utilizes are these little tokens right here. And these are essentially little cultural artistic spots. And they're going to be icons that are going to be located on the board that you can see here. We have a little soccer ball. We have a little library. You've got another building there. And so there's a bunch of different types of these as well. Painting, bag. And so you need to get 5 of those different types. Anytime you would connect to one of these spots, because it'll be essentially like this thing right here. If you connect to it, you grab one of these. And if you have 5 different ones, then you can cash them in for 7 points. So again, a different dynamic of the scoring on the board as a whole. The other main difference between Paris and New York is that when this passenger moves on New York, this passenger goes to not only the one closest, but then it also goes to the next closest as well. So you're eliminating 2 of those spots every single player turn. So it actually goes relatively fast. Paris, however, is 1. Paris also scores slightly differently on the blues and the reds. I take it back earlier. The end train points are actually 2 points, as well as a branching token. So one of the 2 that's necessary to be able to do a branch. But then in the Paris side of things, you get 2 points or 1 point and 1 branching. And so this also, again, is the first line connected to one of these blue ones in Paris, you don't get any points. If you're the second line, so not the first, now you get a point. So again, it changes the slight dynamic and a little bit of more of the Cascadero vibe, where Cascadero did very similar things of not wanting to be the first one connected, but being second or third actually maybe behooves you. So again, how you maneuver on the map as a whole really is the cleverness of this game. So pros and cons. I mean, personally, I love games like this, right? Where the actions you're taking are straightforward. How well you take those actions, not how well you read the rule book, not how well you memorize the rules, not how well you can put 37 steps together, determines it. Because also the dynamic of moving these things around the map and having differences there and adapting is freaking amazing. Now, you're also going to notice that there's lots of different colors of these pieces on the board, right? That I showed you. And that's because at different player counts, you have multiple different lines. So at the 2-player of this game, you get 4 different colored lines. So where you start those lines and where you want to put those lines is going to dramatically shape your areas that you're kind of trying to control with them at the same time. and trying not to overlap, but also trying to then get where you need to, because inevitably you're either going to have to waste branching points or you're going to have a little bit of overlap, and which is going to behoove you when is really the fun part of this game of figuring that out to a slighter degree, because it's also not analysis paralysis consuming, which you could fear in a game like this, but don't worry, it doesn't happen. And I'm one of those people. So if it doesn't happen to me, it shouldn't happen to you, or hopefully it doesn't. I guess the last part of this I have to say is that I kind of wish this was a playmat. And I understand for, playing purposes, it has to be this big, but this is a freaking huge board. And so that's probably the other small downside. But it is beautiful. So take that for what it is. On the flip side of that, right? Like if you have this, depending on the player count, like at 3 players, you get 3 colors. And at 4 players, you only get 2 colors. You're still going to have ways to mitigate, but this board is going to become a lot more crowded. And it's going to be a lot more, potentially a little bit of king making, because, which one do I want to try and maneuver? How you want to do that? Which line is actually going to be closest? Do I want to potentially have 2 lines that are the same, and I'm having to choose between, the second and the 4th player of which line I'm going to use? So there is the potential for that. It's not going to be as deeply strategic overall because of the random nature of this card drawing deck location putting down in the first place. But there's 4 of them out there. So you know what? It might be the furthest one away from your passenger who's way over here on this side of the board. But with clever laying, it becomes the easiest one to get to, and bypassing some of the other ones with how outmaneuvered you've done compared to your other opponents. And that is the element of this game that I cannot state enough that I love. I'll argue that I actually prefer this at the lower player count. I actually prefer to play this with my wife at the 2-player count, but the dynamics are probably going to be a little bit overall appeasing to more people at 3 and 4, just because you're going to have to think a little bit more long term of having to utilize other people's routes just as much as your own. And again, do you want to have more control of using yours, and yours, or 1s and 3s, or players 2s and 4s, depending on who and where things are at? And the Paris side of things adds that dynamic of having these additional tokens and changing the scoring of these reds and blues on the map in the first place. So it gives you a little bit of strategic depth. And so that therein lies the problem that I presented with you at the beginning of the video, right? Do you really need this one if you have the other one, the first version of On the Underground a couple years ago from Luda Creations? Regrettably, I kind of have to say no. I don't really think this is going to be that much dramatically different and that much dramatically, better. It's not necessarily a 2.0. It's like a 1.1 and a 1.5, or a 1.1 and a 1.3 version. And so I think you would be equally happy with either one of these, but if you want just a slight niche up, slight tick up in terms of a little bit of those things that I just mentioned, yeah, you probably would pick this one up over the other one. Both of them are going to give you dynamic experiences, and the core gameplay loop as a whole isn't going to be dramatically different. So if you also did not like the first one, this isn't going to appeal to you in the first place. I am not a pick up and deliver person, right? And this is probably the closest thing to pick up and deliver that I would tolerate. And to be frank with you guys, again, when I say that, let me be very clear about what I mean. I actually really love this game. I really love this game. And I am not a pick up and deliver person at all whatsoever. But this slight twist on that mechanic as a whole just is super, super fun and appealing to me. And so this is a game, I don't get it played as much as I should, but this copy of it just reinvigorated my love for it, and the fact that it's a game that's never going to leave my collection. One of them may, because inevitably, like I said, I don't think I necessarily need 2, because I don't think they're that distinctly different. But which one right now? Give the edge slightly to this one, but you know what? I'll figure it out. So there you go. Luda Creations On the Underground. I mean, it's fantastic. You know what? This is just the base retail copy too. And so you don't need any of the deluxifications. I think this game is absolutely perfect without any of them. It's absolutely wonderful. The wooden pieces and the wooden tracks work tremendously. These little cylinders, they do everything they're needed to do. You don't need anything metal or more fancy plastic. And I personally, in a game like this, prefer the wood pieces in the first place. So, and these tokens they're tokens. You don't really need them to be upgraded either. You could, but completely unnecessary if you don't have them in the first place. Not missing out. So there you go. On the Underground. Freaking awesome game. Highly recommend it. Thanks for watching. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. So I've got this huge pile of colors right now in front of me, and I am really impatient, and I really don't want to sort these all out back into their individual color bags. And so I think I'm just going to dump them all into one bag and make that a problem for future me because present me is done. I brought the board in here and I'm slowly having to rotate it around on the table without disturbing it too much because I already like had to carry it into this room set up. And you know what? I didn't want to like tear it down and set it up again. That is the biggest bane of these videos as a whole. I love doing them. I love talking about them. I love showing them. But it's just, it's one of those things. So I'm carefully trying to rotate so we don't lose everything like I did somewhat in the Bebop video from Bitewing. So, okay, I think I got it.